Sometimes reading in Spanish can feel a bit dry or dull, so what I wanted to do today is share with you 17 different ways you can read or reread with your Spanish classes. Let's get right into it. Hey, my name is Ashley, aka Senior to Spanish, where I provide easy-to-use resources to save you time and energy with your Spanish classes. If you're new here, I just wanted to take a second to remind you that links to everything that I mentioned are going to be down in the description box below. Okay, let's get into the roundup here. Every time I do an activity roundup like this, what I want to do is to just share the ideas with you as quickly as possible because I know your time is limited. Maybe you're even watching this on your prep and you're going, I need something for next hour. So I'm just going to lay things out there as quickly for you as possible. If you want really detailed explanations, or you even want to take that idea and see some variations for ways you could use it and reuse it with a few different tweaks, I do have detailed blog posts and videos explaining these. So this is just going to be a quick, short introduction to give the idea to you so you can use it next hour if you wanted to. But if you wanted to hear more about each of those ideas, again, links down below. Okay, let's get started. Activity number 1 is Mi Lápiz, and this is honestly one of my go-tos for so many things. The way that you do it is that students work in pairs or in small groups. They have one pencil between all of them and one worksheet, and then they have a die or several die. They don't have to share that. They're going to roll the die, and if they get a 6, they can steal the pencil and then begin the worksheet. And the way this connects to reading is you can do it with sentences from the reading. You can do it with multiple choice questions about the reading. The really important thing with Mi Lápiz is that you're not doing long, complicated, super high order thinking sorts of questions, because while they're playing, their teammates are going to be trying to steal the pencil out of their hands. So not long, reflective answers. Multiple choice, true and false, or short translation. Maybe even putting things in order, but honestly, I would say putting things in order, if you have too many sentences, might be too much for Mi Lápiz, because if their thoughts get disrupted when somebody steals the pencil, they might misorder something if there's 20 sentences that they have to put in order, and that would throw everything off. So think short, pretty easy to answer. They're just checking whether they remember or not. They might have to refer to the reading that's right there, but nothing too in-depth. Activity number 2 is running dictation, and this is one of my all-time favorites. You can use it in so many different ways, but let's just share the one, right? Staying focused, staying to the point. Running dictation is where you take sentences from a reading and you're going to put them up on sheets of paper and out in the hallway or maybe in the media center. Or if you have to stay in your classroom, make the font pretty small so students cannot read it from across the room. They have to go to the card and read it on the wall. The one person is going to go read it on the wall, memorize it, and go back to their partner or a group of 3, and they're going to say the sentence out loud. The partner who is seated and listening is going to listen to the partner speaking and record the sentence on their sheet of paper. When they get halfway through, they're going to flip roles. This is great for rereading a story. Okay, next activity I have for you is read and screenshot, and it is really that simple. All you're going to do is take a slideshow presentation like in Google Slides, and you're going to write however many sentences you want in the target language using the structures that you want to target. I like to pull sentences from a reading. This works really, really well with a movie talk or with a Senior Wooly video because they have tons and tons and tons of images. So as students are reading the sentences you've written on the slides, they're going to go to that video and they're going to screenshot a scene from the video that illustrates the sentence that you're reading. You can, of course, reduce the prep by having the students write the sentences. You can reduce the prep by, brainstorming the sentences together on the slides and then distributing the slides through Google Classroom or whatever your LMS is. Again, lots of ways to tweak this. If you are doing this with a story that, isn't connected to a video in any way, you can still do it. You just have them do the sentences and then go to image search and pull in clip art or pictures that they find on the internet that illustrate those sentences. It's just, a different way to do it. Next activity is choral translation. Again, super simple, low prep. You could do this next hour if you wanted to. You're going to project the reading that you have for your students up on the screen, or just make sure everybody has a copy. You're going to read the Spanish, one sentence at a time, and they're going to translate it to the L1 or the shared language of the classroom. So Spanish, everybody else, English. Spanish, everybody else, English, right? Like a chorus. That's the choral translation piece. While you're doing this, you are listening for misunderstandings, for hiccups, for weird things where it's like, oh, everybody got really quiet. We need to clarify what that word means because clearly you don't know it. When we're talking about Spanish, you're not worried about word order, right? Because we flip where the adjectives are from English to Spanish and that sort of thing. So sometimes when they're translating, they don't catch that. That's not a big deal. You're just listening for understanding. Next up is volleyball reading, and this is essentially a twist on choral translation where instead of doing it as a whole group, they're doing it in pairs. So now you have 2 students. One is going to say the Spanish, the other is going to translate the sentence to English. Then this student who just did the translating is going to read the next sentence in Spanish, and their partner is going to translate it into English. Then they'll read the next sentence and their partner will translate it. So it starts to become this kind of back and forth. Some people call this ping pong reading. I like volleyball. Doesn't matter what you call it. They're going to take turns reading, translating back and forth as you go. Now the next twist we have on that one is called speed date translate. I don't ever say that out loud with my students, so they're not like, speed dating, you know? But you're going to do volleyball reading, and you're going to add a rotation and timed element. So now they're going read, translate, beep. One partner gets up, they move to another seat. Then they're going to compare with their new partner and say, okay, how far did you get in the reading? How far did you get? Whoever is closer to the beginning, that's where they're going to start again. And they're going to read in Spanish, translate, read in Spanish, translate until the timer goes beep. Then they're rotating again back to comparing and saying, okay, who was closer to the beginning? That's where we're going to start. And you just keep them going. Easy peasy. Next up is word cloud read aloud. This is, again, super simple. You're going to create a word cloud. There's tons of free generators online. If you literally just Google word cloud generator, boom, done. So once you have your word cloud generator, you're going to copy and paste either the story if you're working with a short story, or you could do a chunk of text from a chapter if you're working on that and just type it in. Either way, then it generates the word cloud for you, which looks kind of crazy, but the words that are repeated most often, the more frequent words, are going to be bigger and the other words are a little bit smaller. Then what you're going to do is you're going to read that selection for them, and as they hear it, they're just going to highlight what they hear. And if they hear it more than once, they're going to highlight it again. Again, options, variations. If you wanted to, you could have them pick out a whole bunch of colors, and when they hear it the first time, it gets one color. If they hear it again, it's already highlighted, they're going to pick up a second color, color it again. So that way they're kind of saying, oh, what words am I hearing a whole bunch? That kind of thing. All right, ready for the next layer? Word cloud read aloud is a pretty chill day because they're sitting, they're listening to you, and they're coloring. So a good way to kind of mix that up or, jazz it up if you're really like, oh, that's really too chill for that one class period. Partner Matamoscas is a great way to take that word cloud you generated, and now we're going to make it a little bit more fast-paced, a little bit more competitive, a game. So you're going to take that word cloud, you're going to put it between a small group or just two people, and you're still reading or you're calling out sentences, and as they're listening, they're going to be the first one to touch it. So you're reading, they're coloring or just marking, and they're racing to be the first one there. If they are the first one to touch it, they get a point. And the little twist that I usually have done on this is if they can't agree, right, freshmen, if they can't agree on who was there first, or they're like, I was first, because they're too competitive, I would just say, oh, my point, and they have to add a point for me on their scorecard. This helps them resolve those disputes quickly, and we can all just keep moving because they don't want me to win. So they will go, oh yeah, that was yours, okay. Next up is Tabata timeline. This is one of my all-time favorites. It combines a Tabata style workout timer, which is, time for work and time for rest, which we use for time to rotate, and a timeline or sequencing activity. And again, there's a ton of different ways you could do this. I'm just going to share one basic. First, you're going to have students fold a sheet of paper so they have a grid, or you can just have them draw, lines and lines, and then they're going to write a sentence in each of the boxes from the reading, something that happened in the story. You can have them write it in Spanish, or you can have them write it in English. Either way is fine. Then they're going to cut apart the boxes. I have students write their names on the back of them because when we're working with little pieces of paper, of course, somebody's going to drop a piece of paper on the floor. And if they have their name on it, it's easier to get it right back to the set that it belongs to. Okay, once all the sentences are cut apart, they're going to leave them on their desk and kind of scramble them up. Now the Tabata part comes in. So the timer is going to start. And when the timer beeps, they're going to rotate to a different desk. I usually just, predetermine the order. They're going to go to the desk and they're going to put those sentences in order according to the reading. I usually would project the reading up on the screen, but you could also have them just carry a printed copy with them. Either way works. So they're going to refer to the story and they're going to put the events in order. When that timer beeps, they're going to scramble everything back up and then they're going to rotate to the next desk. Because the students chose the events and the students wrote the sentences, they're going to have different events on their sheets. There's going to be some overlap, but they do a pretty good job mixing things up because they're all different. Because all of the sentences are a little bit different, but they're all coming from that same story, they're going to get a ton of rereading and repetition as they refer to the story and put the events in order. Like I said, you can change this up by doing different languages, or you can even have students add in events that did not occur, so students have to sort out what did and didn't happen and sequence the story. Totally up to you. Again, more details down below. When I do this activity, I usually start with a timer as like 45 seconds and maybe 5 seconds to rotate. but you might wind up shortening the time that they have to work because as they read and reread and become more and more familiar with the story and with the language, they're going to get faster and faster. I like to use the smartwatch timer on my phone. It's just an app that's free, super easy to tweak the time, and you can crank up the volume on your phone and tell it beep really loud so everybody can hear and rotate. All right, next activity I have for you is read and draw, and again, super simple. I'm not sharing super complex activities here for you. I want something that you can do at any point in time. So read and draw is exactly what it sounds like. You're going to give them sentences and they're going to draw them. You don't even have to pick out the sentences at first if you don't want to. You could just give them a reading, give them a story, give them a chapter of a novel you're working with and say, hey, you need to illustrate what happened here, and I want you to do it in 6 drawings, or I want you to do it in 10 panels, like a comic book kind of panel. However you want to do it, you just pick the specifications. I like to give them specific sentences where I'm pulling out chunks that I really want to see that they can understand this and show me that understanding, but either way works for you. You do always have students who are good at drawing, who are really artistic, who do a beautiful job making these wonderful illustrations. What we're going to do after we do read and draw is you're going to take those beautiful illustrations and, ideally you have a couple to choose from. Maybe you teach a couple class periods that are the same prep. Maybe if you do it, it's kind of nice because it gives you a wider bank, or you can even mix and match between the class periods so they can see each other's illustrations. But now we're going to do reverse running dictation, which, as you might imagine, is very similar to running dictation, but instead of them running, reading the sentence, memorizing it, and coming back to their partner saying it out loud, running dictation, you're going to hang up pictures on the wall. The person who is the seated partner is going to have sentences. So, right, sentence number 1, oh, there's a boy. The partner who is the runner is going to listen to the sentence and they're going to run out to the hallway or wherever you've hung up the pictures that they created during the read and draw. They're going to run out and look, and they're going to say, okay, the picture that's labeled A matches the sentence that my partner just told me. So they're going to go back to their partner and they're going to say A or A, right? You can have them practice the alphabet. Then they're going to keep going until they're halfway and they'll flip. Again, if you're doing a story that doesn't have a video component, it's not a music video, it wasn't a movie talk, it wasn't a Senior Wooly video, that's why it's really nice to do read and draw first, because then you have all of these images you can use for this reverse running dictation activity. Again, it's just an option for you. Next up is listen, write, and draw, which is really kind of another spin on read and draw, but instead what you're going to do is you are going to speak, or honestly, I usually record the sentences ahead of time. Students are going to listen, record the sentence that they hear, and then they're going to draw an illustration to show their comprehension. And I usually do about 12 sentences because it'll take them a little bit of time to listen and do their best really writing. I try and encourage them to spell it correctly. I don't mark them wrong if they spell it incorrectly, but I really want them to think about it and connect it to the words that they've been seeing in the print when we're doing the reading, because I'm not just pulling words from nowhere, right? This is from a reading, or this is from a story, or it's a twist on a story, enough where they could say, oh, I think I do know what that word is supposed to look like, and they could write it. Another option that's really similar is just classic dictation. So instead of having to draw a picture at the end of it, they're just going to listen to you say sentences or listen to a recording that you've made, and then they're going to write the sentences. Okay, next up on this activity list is sound effect reading, and I actually learned this one in a Facebook group from my friend Julie, and it's really pretty simple, but it's super fun and super engaging because they like it. It's like a controlled chaos, obnoxious sort of free pass for the students who love blurting, who love being the center of attention. And maybe you have a student who keeps derailing when you're doing a storytelling or comprehension activity. Give them this job. And if you have several, you can do several. It's very simple. You're reading a story and you're going to come up with sound effects that go with the story. So it's hard to give examples because everybody's story is different, but Amy Marshall gave me actually probably my favorite example of this is one of the stories that she reads with her students. There is a very gassy character. And so when they get to that part, one of the students' jobs, or actually I think she maybe used an app for it, to make a farting sound. And of course they think it's hilarious. So if you could have one student making sounds with their mouth if you wanted to, or you could give them an app to push the button on their phone, however you wanted to do it. But it gives them that outlet and it gives them a way to engage with the story, and they have to be listening because you can't just randomly make the sound, right? The point is that the sound goes with a word or phrase in the story. So while you're telling the story, they're listening and they're going, oh, that was me, that was my cue. And sometimes they need their group members to keep them on it and say, hey, that was it, do it. Next up is the most important sentence, and I learned this one from Eric Richards at a conference, I don't know however many years ago, but I love it. So what they do is you take a reading and you say, okay, what if we got rid of everything except for just 10 sentences in this reading? what are the most important 10 sentences? And then, you can tweak that number, you can have them pick the 10, and then you could have them pick the 5 most important sentences, and you can kind of keep knocking that down. I like to do this in kind of tiers. So they'll do the first 10 individually, and then they'll work with a partner and they'll say, okay, what do we think are the 7 most? Do we have any in common? What can we agree on? And then that pair is going to compare with another pair. So now we have a small group of students, and now they're going to pick like the 3 most important sentences. And again, maybe they had some in common, maybe they have to do some discussion and kind of negotiation, and then we're going to bring it to a whole class and say, can we pick the single most important sentence? And really, this is a summarization technique, because they have to say what is absolutely vital to this story, right? Some of it is just details and fluff, but if we get rid of everything else, can we still figure out what's going on? Or can we still figure out what's going to happen? And again, depending on your level, you could kind of tweak it again and say, okay, now that we've synthesized the 10 most important sentences, could we write one sentence that summarizes everything? That's an output activity, but they're stretching the language that they've already been using. So again, just a tweak for you. We are almost through these activities. Can you believe it? The next one, again, super simple, just true and false. So you're gonna have a student write 10 true or false statements about the reading or about the story or about the selection that you're working with, and then you can trade with another student. They have to respond true or false. I always like to do that extension activity of if it's false, make sure you correct it. And then if they traded, they go back to their partner and they have them correct their work, right? Just a little mini quiz. This is something that's great for really any time, super low prep, great for warm up, even great for a sub plan if you're okay with your students working together while there's a sub in the room. Last one I have for you is called writing between the lines. And this one's a little bit tricky, but I actually really like it. And it's a good option if you've done the most important sentence activity to take those sentences and use them in a different way. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna take the story, or you're gonna take, summarized chunks of the story, and you're going to remove some events. So maybe you have a story, you've summarized into 20 sentences, and then you're gonna pull out a quarter of them or half of them, or, you pick the number depending on your level and your students' familiarity with the story. You're just going to remove them. Then you're going to give them that piece of paper with the sentences removed, and they have to look at the story and say, okay, what happened in these blank chunks, in these space between the lines? Phew! 17 different reading activities. While we were going through them, I tried to give you some ideas with how you could kind of pair them or mix them and match them to use them as like a sequence in your lesson planning. Sometimes I really like to do, choral translation, then volleyball reading, then speed date translate, boom, 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 all in one class period because they kind of naturally build. Or like how I mentioned doing read and draw and then reverse running dictation a following day or later in that week, how those kind of pair together really nicely. But you can really mix and match these and use these with pretty much any reading, which is awesome. Like I mentioned before, links to everything will be down in the description box below. So if you wanted to see a blog post, or you wanted to see some variations for me Lapis, or if you wanted to see more ideas on how you can play Tabata timeline with your students, all of that is down here for you. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you check out the videos on the next screen to see which ones I recommend for you to see next. See you next time. Bye.